Today I'll be teaching about East Asia instead of Miss Jameson, just to give her a break in such. So I hope that all of you have at your desk a note card with a question on it, and then a outline for the guided notes that we'll be taking later on. So if you could look at those and discuss with your partner the question on the note card, that would be great. Thank you. So the question on your note card for each of you is our activating question for today. What comes to mind when you hear the words East Asia? Why do you think that this is? So would someone like to share what them and their partner talked about with regards to this? Just like what sort of image came up when you hear those words and why you think that is, whether it's an experience you've had with a person in the past or something you saw on TV or anything like that. All right, thank you, Chip. That's very helpful. Anyone else? Yes, that's an excellent observation there, Samantha. All right, so now that we've kind of got that out of the way, we need to review where we are. So in the weeks previous, we went over Russia and the republics, and we also went over Southwestern Asia and the Middle East and that area, and South Asia with India and some of the countries there. So do y'all remember all of that for the overall section of Asia pretty well, or are there any review questions you need to ask? All right, that's good. So for today's lesson, our essential question is, how does the rich cultural history of East Asia relate to both its strengths and failures today? And so for the rest of the lesson, just kind of have that in the back of your mind. We'll discuss that at the end of the lesson. But yeah, let's get into our stuff. So East Asia is composed of 6 countries: China, Japan, North and South Korea, Taiwan, and Mongolia. So on the map you can kind of see where each of those are, and China, as you notice, is much bigger, and Japan and Taiwan are islands, and the Koreas are a peninsula. Mongolia is mainly in the desert and such like that. So China and Taiwan are, China's the big one, Taiwan's the little island. The capital of China is Beijing. Its population is about 1.4 billion. So it is by far the largest of all the countries in East Asia and the most influential worldwide. Taiwan's capital is Taipei, and its population is about 25 million. They are not officially recognized as a country by some, but they generally operate independently, so we cover them as a country here. And they have quite a history with China, which is why I paired them on this slide together. Then next, North and South Korea are on the Korean peninsula next to China. The capital of North Korea is Pyongyang. Its population is about 25 million. And the capital of South Korea is Seoul. Its population is about 50 million. South Korea, as you know, is allies with the United States. North Korea, not so much. They're kind of an international pariah. So Japan and Mongolia are the last two. They don't really have much of a connection per se like the other sets. The capital of Japan is Tokyo. Its population is about 125 million. They're one of the most powerful world states there is, and it's composed of the 4 main islands you can see there. Mongolia's capital is Ulaanbaatar. Its population is about 3 million, and it's to the north of China in kind of that gulf, and they're mainly like plains and desert and that sort of thing. So the landscape of East Asia um, is rather inhospitable. There are a lot of mountains and deserts in there, including the Kunlun Mountains, Kunming Mountains, Shandu Mountains, and the Gobi Desert is there. And so because of all these mountains and deserts, it made them rather inaccessible to the rest of the world, which led to them being more isolated and developing a lot of singular things that are very important to how you can understand the region today. As far as resources go, China has the most resources. They have a really lot of natural resources, and they're a giant country, so you would expect that. And Mongolia and North Korea both have a lot of mineral resources, and Japan, Taiwan, and South Korea don't really have a lot of natural resources, so they primarily base their economy on trade and that sort of things, which has helped them open up to the Western world faster than the other ones. Water is another primary thing when looking at the region. There's most of China's population is in the east side of China, where there's a lot of rivers, and that's where a lot of their resources are in. And Japan is a world leader in the fishing industry. I mean, that's their islands. They fish a lot there, and some people accuse them of overfishing, but that's a primary thing that's helped their economy have something to trade with, because they need a lot of other natural resources from other countries. So the climate of East Asia is it's very varied. There's much of the region is in the humid continental and humid subtropical areas, which is kind of similar to what the United States would be, and it's kind of the most hospitable climate there is to live in, especially the eastern river basins of China and some of Japan and such like that. But large parts of East Asia, especially like the western side of China and Mongolia, are the inhospitable regions of the highland, which would be like where the Tibetans lived, and the desert and semi-arid, which is a lot of Mongolia and kind of northern western China. So yes, China is the biggest, most important country there. It's also been inhabited for at least 4,000 years straight, and it's the longest continuously inhabited land group that we know of. Because of this, they have a lot of rich cultural history and fascinating things, and archaeology there is really cool and that sort of thing. For much of China's history, it was ruled by dynasties, which is a ruling family, and then you inherit the throne based on lineage, and then eventually a new dynasty comes and kicks out the old one, and that's how that sort of works. And then you have a lot of like just villages out there. In the 19th century, Europeans, they had kind of traded with them over land, but they started sailing over and really interacting with China, and it caused a lot of stuff because Chinese people had a lot of their own culture and traditions and their own system of government, but then the Western powers were looking to exploit their market and their resources for their own gain. And then in the 20th century, China asserted its independence and kicked out the Western countries, and then from there they had a civil war that was fought between the nationalists and the communists, and eventually the communists, led by Mao Zedong, won the civil war, and the nationalists lost, and they retreated to Taiwan, and that's why Taiwan is, that was his government of Taiwan. They still view themselves as the Republic of China, and China refuses to recognize Taiwan as an independent state and says it's a part of China. And they're still, I believe, technically at war. But because the United States doesn't like communists, we're allies with Taiwan and sell them weapons to prevent Chinese from forcibly taking over Taiwan. As far as cultural and religious things, some of the main things from historical China would be Confucianism, Taoism and Buddhism. Although Buddhism is from India, it has been in China for thousands of years, and they have their kind of own unique little brand of that. And so all of these things would be Chinese culture, and when the Communist Party rose to power, it accepted some parts of Chinese culture and tried to eradicate other parts and replace it with an enlightened form of communism. But in general, a lot of their rich cultural heritage is still able to be seen if you go to China. Japan is the other really important country from this region, and so they have their history is also really fascinating. And in kind of the Middle Ages time period, there was the samurai, the warrior class, and then the rich people, and the shogun was the general leader of all the military and one of the most powerful people, along with the emperor. And so they had all that history. But what's interesting about Japan is in the 18th and 19th century, when industrialization was happening, they were the first East Asian country to really embrace that, and they actually surpassed China as far as power goes really quickly, and were like the king of East Asia for a while there because they industrialized before the other ones. And so because of that, they were more open to the Western world, and their culture is now a mix of both the traditional forms that they had been using and Western ideas and stuff like that, because of the Western influence they allowed in order to get Western technology and Western trading and all that sort of thing. So as far as the governments of the region, China is ruled by the Communist Party. Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, and Mongolia are all democracies with varying levels of freedom, and North Korea is a dictatorship. So the current issues, some of the current issues dealing with that East Asia is dealing with right now would be the Ring of Fire, which is a bunch of volcanoes, and you can't really do anything to change the fact that there are volcanoes, but they erupt, cause earthquakes, that sort of thing, and that's an issue for especially Japan, which is right along in that the Ring of Fire is a sort of like ring of volcanoes in the Pacific Ocean. And so, yeah, that's just something they are continuously having to deal with and react to and try to learn how to properly manage, which leads to a lot of innovation for other countries that don't have to deal with that issue repeatedly over and over. Another issue is one of trade and underpaid labor, because a lot of these East Asian countries, in order to advance themselves economically, they have strategically underpaid their workers in order to get manufacturing in their country and allow them to export things. And so now a lot of those people are kind of, especially in the democracies, wanting to be paid a fair price and pushing back on the practice, but they don't know how that'll not ruin their economy, because their selling point is, we sell you stuff for cheap because we don't pay the workers to make it. So that's a kind of issue that they're currently working to handle in the political and economic sphere. Another issue is one of overcrowding, because China is the most populous country in the world, and they've got 1.4 billion people. A lot of those live in cities. Most of China's population lives over in the southeast part of China, where it's the most hospitable as far as region. And Japan is extremely crowded as well, with 125 million people in 4 islands, and 70% of Japan's population lives in cities. So it's really, really crowded, and so that's something they have to deal with. Another current event issue for Asia is human rights abuses by authoritarian regimes, whether it be North Korea or the Chinese Communist Party. They have they're very suppressive of free speech and don't let their citizens see opposing point of views, and crack down harshly on those who oppose the government. And a final issue is racism, because a lot of the Asian countries haven't gotten as far past racism as some of the Western countries where we have anti-racists and a lot of push for racial equality and that sort of thing. They're still in a little bit more of a traditional mindset, and they're very skeptical. Originally, they were skeptical of white people when the Europeans were coming over, and now they still have a lot of racial stereotyping, and black people aren't treated equally there, and so that's an issue that they're fighting with as well. So that's our presentation, and now if y'all can remember the essential question of how has East Asia's cultural history affected the issues we see today of overcrowding or racism or authoritarian regimes or just anything, and not just their problems, but also their successes and their economic successes and their ability to maintain their heritage and not kind of have to assimilate and that sort of thing. Yeah, it's kind of it's an open-ended question, and it's something that bears thinking about. So what do y'all think? Yeah, those are some good thoughts there. And yeah, that's a good point, James. All right, so anything else? All right then, so the project for today is that I want in your group of two, each group to make a presentation about a specific cultural or ethnic or group as far as in East Asia, and present it to the class so that we can have a deeper dive into that. And so if you wanted to do a minority group, such as like minority populations of Muslims or Christians or in China, or if you wanted to talk about Tibetan culture or just the culture of a country like Mongolia or Korea or Japan or something like that, or if you want to talk about specifically Confucianism or Buddhism, any of those would be good. And to avoid everyone giving us a presentation on the same thing, what I want you to do is, once you've decided what group you're going to research, you need to come up to the board and write it down, and then once two people have written it down, no one else can write it down, and they'll have to choose a different thing. So we've got, 6 groups here, so that's at least 3 different things. Hopefully we get 5 or 6 different things. It'll be graded on a rubric of 5 points. Each one will be just a pass-fail. You have it or you don't. So the rubric will be tell us some about East Asia generally, so that we know you can't just talk about one specific group, but say how it relates to the rest of East Asia, something to show that you understand this in a broader point. And then choosing a specific group is a 5th of the grade, so you should be able to get that one. Including multiple pictures, so at least 2. You can do more if you want, because this is a digital presentation. Will be another point, and then talking about not just the group as it's practiced today, but its history and how that kind of plays into the group, and maybe like why they do what they do will be a section, and the final section will be telling us some sort of objective information about the group, like their population size or something about how they're treated, or giving us some more objective information about the group well. So those 5 points. If you have any questions, ask me, and with 15 minutes left in class, we'll do our presentations. So have fun working. Thanks.